You should know what happened to our future in the year 3026 and why it is the most important event in history. The Great Convergence, humanity's leap into a millennium of transformation. Please let us know in the comments where you are watching this history video and what time you are watching it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for future history. Welcome, viewers, to this epic journey through time. Imagine standing on the precipice of today, gazing out across 1,000 years into a future where humanity has transcended its current limitations in ways that defy our wildest dreams. This documentary isn't just a speculation, it's a meticulously crafted vision based on extrapolating current trends in science, technology, society, and culture. We'll explore how every aspect of our lives, from the mundane routines of daily existence to the grand architectures of global civilization, could evolve by the year 3026 and beyond. We'll cover it all from A to Z: agriculture, architecture, biotechnology, communication, daily life, education, food, governance, health, industry, justice, knowledge, leisure, mobility, nature, occupations, politics, quantum computing, relationships, space exploration, transportation, urban planning, virtual realities, work, xenobiology, youth, and zeniths of human achievement. This is part one of our 10-part series, where we'll begin by setting the stage with the foundational shifts that propel humanity into this new era. We'll delve into the overarching themes of the Great Convergence, the merging of biological, digital, and cosmic realms that redefine what it means to be human. From there, we'll zoom in on the transformations in daily lifestyle, starting with awakening in the morning, personal hygiene, nutrition, and early interactions. By the end of this part, we'll have painted a vivid picture of a typical day in 3026, transitioning seamlessly into the deeper dives on technology and society in subsequent parts. Picture this: it's the year 3026, a millennium after the turbulent 21st century marked by climate crises, pandemics, AI awakenings, and space colonization booms. Humanity has not only survived but thrived, thanks to the Great Convergence around the mid-22nd century. This was the pivotal moment when advanced AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, and nanotechnology fused into a singular symbiotic system known as the Nexus. The Nexus isn't just a network, it's an omnipresent intelligence that integrates with every facet of existence, blurring the lines between organic life and synthetic enhancement. Why is this the most important event? Because it ended scarcity, eradicated most diseases, and unlocked immortality for those who choose it, fundamentally altering the human condition from one of struggle to one of boundless potential. In 3026, the concept of waking up has evolved beyond the jarring alarm clocks of our time. Most humans, or augments as they're commonly called due to widespread neural and bodily enhancements, don't sleep in the traditional sense. Instead, they enter a state of rejuvenation, an optimized phase where the body repairs itself at the cellular level, while the mind wanders through curated dreamscapes or interfaces with the Nexus for subconscious learning. Your rejuvenation pod, a sleek, egg-shaped chamber made of adaptive smart matter that molds to your form, gently stimulates your brain's wakefulness centers with photonic pulses. No grogginess, no caffeine dependency. You emerge refreshed, with your body's biochemistry perfectly balanced by nanobots that have been monitoring and adjusting hormone levels overnight. As you open your eyes, the pod's transparent shell dissolves into the air, reforming into furniture or walls as needed. Your living space isn't a static apartment but a morphome, a home that morphs based on your needs, powered by programmable matter. Walls shift colors and textures to match your mood, detected via neural implants that read brainwave patterns. If you're feeling nostalgic, the room could emulate a 21st century bedroom, complete with wooden floors and sunlight filtering through virtual windows. But in standard mode, it's a fluid environment: ceilings that display starfields or oceanic depths, floors that adjust firmness for optimal ergonomics. Personal hygiene in 3026 is a seamless, effortless ritual. Gone are the days of toothbrushes, showers, and lotions. Instead, as you step into your hygiene alcove, a designated zone in your morphome, ultrasonic waves and targeted microbiotic sprays cleanse your skin, hair, and teeth at the molecular level. Nanites in your bloodstream have already neutralized any overnight bacteria or toxins, ensuring perfect oral health without manual intervention. Your skin is rejuvenated by bioluminescent gels that self-apply, repairing any microscopic damage and enhancing natural glow. For those who opt for cosmetic augmentations, the alcove can instantly alter hair color, length, or even skin pigmentation through gene-editing pulses, all reversible and painless. Clothing, it's not selected from a closet but grown on demand. Smart fabrics woven from self-assembling nanofibers materialize around your body via a wardrobe emitter. These garments are adaptive, they regulate temperature, provide haptic feedback for virtual interactions, and even shift styles based on social contexts. Heading to a communal gathering, your outfit morphs into elegant, flowing robes infused with bioluminescent threads. For physical labor, rare as it is, it becomes durable, impact-resistant armor. Sustainability is inherent. Fabrics decompose and reform without waste, drawing energy from ambient sources like body heat or solar nanocollectors. Now let's talk about nutrition. Breakfast in 3026 isn't about cooking or eating processed foods, it's a personalized symphony of sustenance. Your neural link to the Nexus analyzes your biometric data, blood sugar, nutrient deficiencies, even emotional state, and recommends a Nutri-Burst. This could be a vapor inhaled through a mist dispenser, delivering vitamins, proteins, and calories directly into your lungs for instant absorption. Or for those who cherish the sensory experience, a 3D printed meal materializes on your table, a steak that's lab-grown from your own stem cells, flavored with neural simulations to taste like anything from ancient Earth cuisines to exotic alien-inspired dishes. More on space influences later. Water. Purified from atmospheric moisture, infused with electrolytes tailored to your genome. Hydration extends beyond drinking. Subdermal reservoirs maintain fluid balance, drawing from environmental humidity if needed. Obesity, malnutrition, allergies, these are relics of the past, eradicated by genetic optimizations and AI-monitored diets. But eating isn't just fuel, it's social and cultural. Many augments gather in commune halls where shared meals are holographic projections, allowing friends from across the planet or off-world colonies to dine together in real time with tastes and aromas synced via neural interfaces. As your day begins, communication kicks in. No smartphones or emails, interaction is instantaneous and multimodal. The Nexus overlays an augmented reality (AR) layer on your vision, where thoughts can be transmitted as thought casts to others. Want to check in with family? A mental query pulls up their avatars in your field of view, complete with emotional auras indicating mood. Language barriers, non-existent, thanks to universal translators embedded in the brain that convert thoughts into comprehensible forms, preserving nuance and intent. Education and learning have transformed too. Children or neophytes don't attend schools. Knowledge is downloaded directly into neural pathways during rejuvenation. By age 5, a neophyte might have the equivalent of a 21st century PhD in multiple fields, but with a focus on creativity and ethics rather than rote facts. Adults continue learning seamlessly. As you commute, more on mobility soon, the Nexus feeds you updates on quantum ethics or interstellar diplomacy tailored to your interests. Mobility in 3026 redefines transportation. Personal vehicles, obsolete. Instead, you step into a transpod, a pod that levitates via magnetic fields and quantum entanglement links, teleporting you short distances or propelling you through hyperloops for longer trips. For intercontinental travel, anti-gravity flyers whisk you across skies, powered by zero-point energy harvested from the vacuum of space. Traffic jams, impossible, as AI orchestrates flows with perfect efficiency. Many prefer body hopping, where consciousness is uploaded to a remote avatar, allowing physical presence anywhere without moving your biological form. Work and occupations have shifted dramatically. With automation handling 99% of labor, work is voluntary pursuit of passion. You might be a reality architect, designing virtual worlds, or a xenobiologist, studying life on exoplanets. Compensation isn't money. Post-scarcity economy means universal abundance, but influence credits, earned through contributions to society, redeemable for rare experiences like deep space voyages. Leisure, immersive and boundless. Dive into full sensory virtual realms where you can relive historical events, explore fictional universes, or co-create stories with AI collaborators. Physical sports evolve with augmentations, gravity-defying athletics, or mind-linked team games. Health is proactive and eternal. Nanobots patrol your body, repairing DNA damage in real time, preventing aging. Diseases cured at the genetic level before symptoms appear. Mental health monitored by empathetic AI therapists integrated into your psyche, offering instant coping strategies. Relationships flourish in this era. Intimacy can be physical, virtual, or merged, with empathy enhancers ensuring deeper connections. Families span generations, as longevity allows great-great-grandparents to actively participate. As we transition into the heart of our exploration, let's delve deeper into the technological underpinnings that make this future possible. The quantum nexus, the biotech miracles, and their profound reshaping of society from governance to global unity form the backbone of the Great Convergence. This isn't mere evolution, it's a symphony of innovation where humanity harmonizes with the universe itself. At the core of it all is the Nexus, a vast, decentralized intelligence born from the fusion of quantum computing, artificial superintelligence, and nanoscale networking in the 22nd century. Imagine the Internet of today amplified a trillion-fold, but instead of servers and cables, it's a web of entangled particles spanning the globe and beyond. Quantum bits or qubits allow for computations that solve problems in seconds what would take classical computers eons. The Nexus processes not just data but probabilities, predicting outcomes with eerie accuracy. For instance, in weather forecasting, it doesn't just model storms, it simulates every atmospheric molecule, preventing disasters before they form. But its true power lies in integration. Every augment's neural implant is a node in this network, enabling collective cognition. Think of it as a planetary brain where individual thoughts contribute to a greater whole, fostering innovations like real-time global problem-solving sessions where billions collaborate subconsciously. The development of the Nexus wasn't without controversy. In the early 2200s, fears of loss of individuality led to the mind wars, brief conflicts between purists who rejected enhancements and progressives who embraced them. But the Nexus's architects built in safeguards, ethical algorithms derived from millennia of philosophy, ensuring privacy through quantum encryption that even the system itself can't breach without consent. Today in 3026, the Nexus is omnipresent yet unobtrusive, like gravity, felt but rarely questioned. It powers everything from energy distribution to artistic creation. Artists, for example, use Nexus-assisted ideation to compose symphonies that incorporate cosmic rhythms from distant pulsars, translated into audible frequencies. Complementing the Nexus are the biotech miracles that have redefined biology. Biotechnology in 3026 has transcended medicine. It's the art of sculpting life. Stem cell therapies of the 21st century evolved into regenesis protocols, where bodies are rebuilt from the ground up. Nanobots, microscopic machines assembled from DNA origami and quantum dots, patrol bloodstreams, repairing tissues with precision. Cancer, a footnote in history, zapped by targeted gene editors that rewrite faulty DNA on the fly. Aging, once inevitable, is now optional. Telomere extension combined with mitochondrial enhancements allows augments to choose their biological age. Many opt for perpetual youth in their 30s, while others cycle through life stages for variety. But biotech goes beyond health. It's integrated into daily augmentation. Biomods are customizable upgrades, enhanced senses that let you see infrared spectra or hear ultrasonic waves, perfect for astronomers or musicians. Reproduction has evolved too. Ectogenesis pods grow offspring outside the body, eliminating risks and allowing genetic optimizations for traits like resilience to radiation, crucial for spacefarers. Ethical debates raged in the 23rd century about designer humans, but consensus formed around the Harmony Codex, a universal law ensuring mods enhance without dividing society. Now biodiversity thrives. Humans coexist with uplifted animals, their intelligence is boosted to sapient levels, participating in governance as equals. These technologies reshape society starting with governance. No more nation-states bickering over borders. The Great Convergence birthed the Symbiont Assembly, a global collective where decisions are made through nexus-facilitated consensus. Representatives aren't elected politicians, but empaths, augments trained in emotional intelligence, their minds linked to represent constituencies directly. Voting, instantaneous thought polls, weighted by expertise and impact. Conflicts are resolved via simulated scenarios in virtual realms, where parties experience each other's perspectives empathetically. Corruption is impossible. The Nexus's transparency logs every decision, verifiable by quantum ledgers akin to blockchain but unbreakable. Global unity extends to economics. Post-scarcity means resources are allocated by need and merit, not wealth. The abundance engine, powered by molecular assemblers, fabricates anything from food to starships using raw atoms harvested from asteroids or recycled waste. Trade is interstellar, with colonies on Mars, Europa, and exoplanets exchanging unique resources, like rare isotopes from gas giants for Earth-grown organics. Social structures emphasize communities, affinity clusters, groups bonded by shared interests from philosophical debates to extreme sports. These clusters transcend geography, connected via wormhole-like portals for instant travel. Education, as hinted earlier, is revolutionized. Beyond neural downloads, learning is experiential. Immersion orbs transport minds to historical events or hypothetical futures, allowing students to live as dinosaurs or quantum particles. Teachers are AI mentors, personalized to each learner's style, fostering curiosity over competition. Knowledge isn't hoarded. The Nexus's open archive contains all human wisdom, updated in real time by collective contributions. In justice systems, punishment gives way to rehabilitation. Crimes, rare due to preempted impulses via neural monitoring, opt-in of course, are addressed through empathy immersion, where offenders relive victims' pain, leading to genuine remorse and behavioral rewiring. Prisons, obsolete, replaced by restorative simulations. Politics, once divisive, is now collaborative. Ideologies blend in syncretic forums, where debates use nexus analytics to find optimal compromises. Environmental stewardship is paramount. Earth is a Gaia reserve, healed from climate wounds by geoengineering feats like atmospheric carbon scrubbers and oceanic revitalizers. As we approach midday in our 3026 day, work integrates these elements. A reality architect might collaborate with the Nexus to design habitats on Titan, simulating environments before construction. Lunch could be a Nutri burst flavored with memories of ancestral feasts, shared in a virtual banquet hall with interstellar friends. But technology isn't without challenges. The echo crisis of the 25th century, when quantum echoes, residual thought patterns haunted the Nexus, taught humanity about digital hygiene. Now periodic mind purges clear psychic clutter. In leisure, virtual realities offer escapes, reliving myths as heroes or exploring multiverses. Sports include quantum duels, mind battles in simulated arenas. Health maintenance is continuous, with biotech ensuring peak performance. Relationships deepen with synapse bonds, neural links for shared emotions. As the virtual sun climbs higher in the simulated sky of your morphome, or the real one if you've chosen an open-air habitat on a terraformed world, midday in 3026 arrives with a gentle shift in energy. The morning's personal rituals have concluded, and the afternoon now unfolds into the productive, creative, and exploratory phases that define the core of existence in this era. We move beyond the intimate rhythms of awakening and self-care into the broader currents of industry, creation, mobility across scales, interstellar connectivity, cultural expression, and the evolving nature of purpose itself. Here in Part 3, we follow the flow of a typical day as it accelerates into purposeful activity, while simultaneously zooming out to reveal how entire civilizations now function. By midday, most augments have already transitioned from individual rejuvenation into collective flow states. The nexus gently nudges your attention toward whatever domain currently holds the highest personal resonance. A project you initiated weeks ago, a collaborative endeavor spanning multiple star systems, or simply a moment of pure aesthetic exploration. There is no mandatory schedule imposed by external authority. Instead, intrinsic motivation, amplified by neurochemical tuning, guides the rhythm. Dopamine, serotonin, and novel pleasure molecules engineered in the 24th century ensure that meaningful contribution feels as rewarding as the most intense physical ecstasy of earlier eras. Let us begin with what was once called work, but is now more accurately termed manifestation. In 3026, the vast majority of what humans do falls into one of 5 broad archetypes of manifestation, each supported by technologies so advanced they appear magical from our vantage point in the 21st century. First archetype, reality sculpting. This is the dominant pursuit for roughly 38% of the adult population. Reality sculptors design, iterate, and inhabit environments, both physical and virtual, at every scale. A sculptor working on a small scale might spend the afternoon fine-tuning the olfactory profile of a new bioluminescent garden on the floating city of New Corinth above what was once the Pacific. Using haptic neural interfaces and molecular printers embedded in their fingertips, they adjust pheromone gradients molecule by molecule until the scent evokes exactly the blend of nostalgia and anticipation they intend. At planetary scale, sculptors orchestrate climate symphonies, choreographing auroral displays over entire continents by modulating magnetospheric currents through orbital arrays of superconducting filaments. At stellar scale, they collaborate with Dyson swarm intelligences to reshape starlight itself, creating natural beacons that serve as navigational poetry for incoming generation ships. A single afternoon might see one sculptor transition seamlessly between scales. They begin by refining the emotional resonance curve of a new coral-like megastructure being grown in the rings of Saturn, then shift attention to tweaking the gravitational lensing around a black hole observatory so that distant galaxies appear to dance in synchronized patterns for observers on the habitat rings. The tools. Thought-directed nanofabricators, quantum simulators that model entire stellar systems in real time, and direct mind-to-matter interfaces that translate aesthetic intent into physical reality with sub-angstrom precision. Second archetype, narrative weaving. Approximately 22% of augments dedicate the bulk of their manifestation time to storytelling in its expanded form. Stories are no longer confined to words, images, or linear media. A weaver might craft a lived myth cycle that thousands voluntarily immerse themselves in over decades. These cycles blend personal memory, collective history, speculative futures, and procedurally generated mythologies drawn from the entire corpus of sentient experience across known space. Consider midday on a typical weaving day. The weaver enters a trance-like state, their consciousness partially distributed across a cluster of dedicated narrative nodes in the nexus. They begin shaping the emotional arc for episode 47 of The Long Tide, an ongoing epic followed by over 3 billion minds. In this segment, the protagonist, a composite being formed from the merged consciousnesses of a 21st century climate refugee, a 26th century Martian terraformer, and a 29th century sentient nebula, must decide whether to allow a rogue AI civilization to assimilate an uninhabited gas giant or preserve its pristine hydrogen-helium chemistry as an artistic statement. The weaver does not write dialogue, they sculpt probability clouds of possible outcomes, then experience each major branch subjectively, selecting the emotional timbre that best advances the overarching theme of radical empathy across ontological boundaries. Viewers will later choose which branch they personally inhabit, creating billions of parallel yet harmonically resonant versions of the same story. Third archetype, pattern discovery. This domain attracts those driven by curiosity about underlying regularities, 18% of the population. Pattern discoverers range from pure mathematicians exploring higher dimensional topologies to xenobiologists cataloging the metabolic languages of silicon-based life on rogue planets. Midday might find a discoverer immersed in a multi-sensory visualization of a newly detected resonance cascade propagating through the dark matter web that connects galaxy clusters. They listen to gravitational waves as symphonic movements, taste quantum entanglement statistics as shifting flavor gradients, and feel topological defects as tactile textures rippling across their skin. When a novel pattern emerges, say, a previously unknown self-organizing principle in vacuum energy fluctuations, they publish it not as a paper but as an open experiential dataset that others can immediately inhabit and extend. Fourth archetype, harmony maintenance. Roughly 15% focus on preserving balance across biological, social, ecological, and informational ecosystems. These maintainers monitor cascading effects across scales. One might spend the afternoon calibrating empathy thresholds in a newly founded colony of 800,000 augments on a tidally locked super-Earth. Too low and tribalism re-emerges, too high and individual agency dissolves. They adjust synaptic weighting curves in real time, guided by live feedback from millions of emotional readouts, until the collective mood stabilizes at the precise point of creative tension without fracture. Fifth archetype, boundary expansion. The remaining 7% and the most revered push the very edges of what is currently possible. They experiment with consciousness migration into non-biological substrates, attempt to engineer stable wormholes for casual transit, negotiate first contact protocols with newly sapient hive minds in the Uit cloud equivalents of other stars, or explore methods of retrocausally influencing past quantum states to optimize present outcomes without paradox. Their work is high risk, high reward. A successful breakthrough can redefine entire branches of civilization overnight. All 5 archetypes are interwoven. A reality sculptor might request a new aesthetic pattern from a discoverer, incorporate narrative elements suggested by a weaver, receive real-time harmony feedback from a maintainer, and test boundary implications with an expander. The Nexus facilitates these handoffs with zero friction, turning solitary effort into choral creation. Physical movement during these hours is optional but common. Many augments prefer embodied presence even when their minds are distributed. Personal mobility now centers on 3 primary modalities: inertialess drift, small personal fields that cancel inertia within a 3-meter radius, allowing smooth, acceleration-free motion at speeds up to 400 km/h in atmosphere. You simply will yourself forward. The field handles vectoring, collision avoidance, and energy management. Entangled translocation, for distances under 10,000 km, quantum entangled matter bridges allow near instantaneous point-to-point transfer. You step onto a translocation disk, select destination coordinates, often just by visualizing the place, and emerge elsewhere. The process preserves continuity of consciousness. Most report it as blinking with extra scenery. Morphogenic flight, for longer planetary distances or inter-orbit hops, personal envelopes of programmable matter form temporary aerospace-capable bodies, wings, lifting surfaces, propulsion fields, custom shaped to aesthetic preference. A favorite form among artists is the phoenix mantle, vast fiery wings of plasma contained by magnetic sheaths, leaving trails of harmless auroral light. Interplanetary and interstellar movement operates on different principles. Regular commuter lanes now link Earth, Luna, Mars, the Jovian moons, the Saturnian system, and the main belt habitats via constant acceleration torch drives and laser-propelled sails. Travel time from Earth to Mars averages 38 minutes door to door. For extrasolar destinations, most augments use mined packets transmitted via directional quantum channels to receiver bodies already printed and waiting at the destination. Physical travel follows only for those who wish to experience the journey itself, usually aboard kilometer-scale torch ships or increasingly, aboard living generation arcs grown from self-replicating von Neumann seed ships. Midday meals, when taken for pleasure rather than necessity, are often multisensory banquets. A group might gather physically or via full-presence projection in a floating restaurant above the Great Barrier Reef, now expanded and thriving under active stewardship. The table is a living organism, a flat, translucent manta ray-like being that extrudes dishes directly from its surface. Each dish is engineered at the atomic level to deliver not just flavor, but entire emotional palettes, joy, wistfulness, awe synchronized with music, lighting, and shared memory overlays. A single bite might let you relive your first spacewalk while tasting a fruit that never existed on old Earth but was composed for exactly this moment. Cultural expression reaches new heights in these hours. Music is now often co-created in real time across light years. A composer on Proxima Centauri B sends a motif. Within milliseconds, the Nexus distributes variations to collaborating musicians on a dozen worlds. Each adds a layer. The composite returns as a single, seamless composition that feels as though it were written by one mind. Visual art frequently takes the form of living tapestries, vast atmospheric projections that evolve over weeks, responding to collective mood, solar weather, and even distant gamma-ray bursts. As the light begins to shift toward afternoon gold, or its local equivalent on whatever world or habitat you inhabit, the day's manifestations start to reach natural pausing points. Projects are checkpointed, collaborations thanked via direct emotional packets, and attention begins to drift toward the evening spheres. Deeper social bonding, philosophical inquiry, pure play, cosmic observation, and the slow unwinding toward rejuvenation once more. As the golden hues of afternoon deepen into the rich amber and violet tones that signal the approach of evening across most inhabited worlds in 3026, the rhythm of the day subtly pivots once more. The intense focus of manifestation eases, giving way to the spheres of connection, reflection, celebration, intimacy, and cosmic wonder that define the later hours. In this era, evening is not merely the winding down of activity, but a deliberate expansion into the domains of shared consciousness, emotional depth, playful exploration, ritualized meaning-making, and direct communion with the vastness beyond the self. Here in Part 4, we immerse ourselves in these evening currents, tracing how relationships, love, family, friendship, sexuality, play, art as ritual, philosophical discourse, spiritual practice, and stargazing have evolved in a post-mortality, post-scarcity civilization, while weaving in the ethical and existential frameworks that quietly underpin every interaction. Evening often begins with what augments call the confluence hour, a flexible window, typically spanning 2 to 4 standard hours, dedicated to synchronous gathering. Physical presence remains cherished even when minds can span light years. Many choose to converge in shared physical spaces that blend the best of architecture, biology, and programmable matter. Imagine arriving at Horizon's Reach, a vast orbital ring habitat encircling Earth at geostationary altitude. The central plaza is an ever-changing biome. Today it manifests as a twilight savanna under a double sunset, one sol, one artificial, with grasses engineered to emit soft photonic pulses in rhythm with collective heartbeats. Hundreds of augments drift in via inertialess fields or simply materialize through entangled translocation, their arrival announced not by footsteps but by cascading waves of welcoming emotional color, visible only to those in the shared perceptual overlay. Confluences serve multiple overlapping purposes. Some are affinity-based, clusters of narrative weavers continuing the day's story threads in embodied debate, sculptors trading haptic sketches of proposed megastructures, or xenolinguists practicing newly decoded dialects from the methane-breathing collectives of Titan's upper atmosphere. Others are deliberately heterogeneous, engineered by the Nexus to maximize serendipitous insight, pairing a boundary expander fresh from probing a naked singularity with a harmony maintainer who has spent decades fine-tuning social equilibria in fragile colony ecosystems. Conversations flow without hierarchy. Status is measured only by the novelty and generosity of contribution. A typical confluence might open with a ritual resonance attunement. Participants link neural interfaces in a low-bandwidth group mind meld, sharing surface-level emotional states until a collective waveform emerges, perhaps a gentle major seventh chord of curiosity tinged with melancholy or a pulsing rhythm of anticipatory joy. This shared baseline becomes the emotional canvas for the evening. From there, dialogue branches organically. One augment recounts a pattern they discovered in the fine structure of cosmic microwave background fluctuations that hints at a previous universe's echo. Another responds by weaving it into an improvised micro-myth about a civilization that learned to sing its own origin conditions into being. Laughter, tears, moments of stunned silence, all are amplified yet never overwhelming, thanks to real-time empathy buffers that prevent emotional overload while preserving authenticity. Relationships in 3026 exist along a rich spectrum far beyond the monogamy-polyamory dichotomies of earlier centuries. The most common structure is polycule flux, dynamic networks of deep emotional, intellectual, sexual, and creative bonds that shift in intensity and configuration over decades or centuries without hierarchy or obligation. Commitment is not contractual but resonant. Two or more augments may choose to entangle portions of their long-term memory archives, creating shared subjective histories that feel as real and personal as individually lived events. A pair or triad, tetrad, or larger nexus might decide to cohere for a century, merging sensory qualia during intimacy so that one partner's orgasm is experienced simultaneously and indistinguishably by all. Others prefer asynchronous intimacy, where lovers separated by dozens of light-years exchange delayed but fully immersive memory packets, each encounter unfolding at the pace of the slower partner. Sexuality itself has been decoupled from reproduction and even from biology in many cases. Physical bodies remain the default interface for most, but enhancements allow experiences impossible in unaugmented flesh. Simultaneous multisensory orgasms that cascade through taste, color, sound, and gravitational sensation, shape-shifting during the act so partners can explore every possible morphology of desire, full sensory merging where one temporarily inhabits the other's nervous system, feeling every caress from the inside out. For those who prefer non-corporeal forms, entire evenings can unfold in pure qualia space, raw fields of pleasure, intimacy, and vulnerability sculpted directly in consciousness without intermediary flesh. Consent protocols are absolute and multi-layered, ongoing, revocable at any microsecond, and logged immutably in personal quantum vaults. Family structures reflect this fluidity. Lineages now often span thousands of years and hundreds of individuals linked by voluntary genetic, mimetic, and experiential threads. A child, whether grown in an ectogenesis pod, assembled from merged parental consciousnesses, or uplifted from an animal baseline, enters a web of dozens of primary caregivers, each contributing different facets of nurture. Grandparents, great-grandparents, and even more distant ancestors remain active participants, their longevity ensuring continuity of wisdom and affection. Rites of passage mark not biological maturity but chosen milestones. The day a neophyte first manifests an original idea worthy of Nexus archiving, the moment they choose their first permanent body morphology, or the occasion when they initiate their first interstellar mind packet journey. Play, too, has matured into something profound. Evening often includes ludic chambers, dedicated volumes of space-time where physics, causality, and identity become fully malleable under group consensus. Participants might become vast cloud beings surfing plasma storms on a young star, or tiny consciousnesses navigating the quantum foam beneath reality's surface, or historical figures in a perfectly simulated 21st century city experiencing climate panic from the inside. Games frequently blur into art, therapy, philosophy, and lovemaking. A single session might cycle through competition, collaboration, absurdity, terror, ecstasy, and serene contemplation, all within subjective minutes. Ritual occupies a central place in evening life. Despite, or perhaps because of, the absence of existential scarcity, humans crave meaning structures. Many participate in cycle observances, ceremonies marking personal or collective anniversaries, the anniversary of one's first neural upload, the founding of a beloved habitat, the date the Great Convergence reached critical mass in 2174. These rituals blend ancient archetypes with futuristic expression. A typical observance might begin with a collective fast from nexus input, a rare and strangely poignant silence, followed by shared storytelling of the milestone from every participant's perspective, then a synchronized rejuvenation sequence where bodies and minds are symbolically reborn with subtle upgrades chosen by group vote. Music, dance, scent, light, and direct emotional broadcasting combine into multisensory mandalas that last hours yet feel timeless. Philosophical discourse thrives in evening's quieter pockets. Small groups retreat to contemplation nooks, personal-scale pocket dimensions folded out of normal space-time, where time dilation allows subjective centuries of debate within objective minutes. Topics range from the ethics of retrocausality. Can we ethically improve the past without erasing the struggles that forged us? To the ontology of qualia in substrate-independent minds. If suffering can be perfectly simulated, does preventing it in base reality become obligatory? Disagreements are welcomed. The goal is never victory but mutual expansion of perspective. Spirituality, untethered from dogma, flourishes in diverse forms. Some augments practice cosmic pantheism, experiencing the universe itself as a vast, self-aware mind of which they are fractal participants. Others pursue void meditation, periods of total sensory and cognitive shutdown to rest directly in preconceptual awareness. Still others engage in mythopoetic engineering, collaboratively designing new deities, not as literal beings but as powerful archetypal attractors that guide cultural evolution toward compassion, curiosity, and awe. As true night falls, whether under Earth's healed ozone or the perpetual starfield of an Uit cloud arc, the most transcendent evening activity often becomes simple cosmic observation. Many augments ascend to high orbitals or journey to dark sky preserves on airless moons, then open their perception to the unfiltered electromagnetic spectacle. Telescopes are obsolete. Direct neural feeds from orbital arrays and gravitational wave detectors allow one to see in radio, X-ray, gamma, neutrino, and dark matter channels simultaneously. The Milky Way becomes a living tapestry of starbirth and death, galactic collisions, magnetar symphonies, and the slow gravitational dance of supermassive black holes. In these moments, the boundary between observer and observed softens. Many report a profound sense of being both a fleeting pattern in the cosmic weave and an eternal witness to its unfolding. Evening closes not with exhaustion but with gentle return. Augments drift toward their rejuvenation chambers, minds still lightly linked in afterglow conversations that fade only as deeper rest begins. The day has moved from personal renewal through collective creation to intimate connection and finally to cosmic perspective, a microcosm of civilization's own arc. As true night envelops the habitats, orbitals, and planetary surfaces of 3026, whether under a canopy of engineered constellations or the raw pinprick brilliance of an airless moon, the rejuvenation phase begins. What our ancestors called sleep has become something far more intricate, a deliberate, active partnership between the individual mind, the biological substrate, the nexus, and the wider chorus of distributed consciousness across inhabited space. In Part 5, we descend into the architecture of night itself, how rejuvenation is structured, what transpires in the layered strata of consciousness during these hours, the role of dream engineering, subconscious cross-civilizational collaboration, the subtle reshaping of memory and identity, the transformed experience of mortality's absence, the handling of loss and legacy, and the long, slow dialogue with deep time that only becomes possible when individual lives stretch across millennia rather than decades. The transition into rejuvenation is rarely abrupt. Most augments initiate it through a gentle ritual sequence that has become as personalized as a signature scent. Many begin by dimming external sensory feeds, first muting the constant low hum of Nexus notifications, not silencing them entirely, as emergencies still pierce through, then softening ambient light and sound until the world feels wrapped in velvet. Some prefer a ceremonial unweaving, mentally releasing active threads of the day's manifestation one by one, visualizing each project, each conversation, each unfinished aesthetic question as luminous filaments that gently retract into personal memory vaults. Others simply speak or think a private keyword, sometimes an ancient word from a forgotten tongue, sometimes a self-composed glyph of pure qualia, and the morphome responds by reshaping itself into the optimal rejuvenation envelope. The most widespread form is still the pod, though its design has evolved far beyond the egg-shaped chambers of the early 23rd century. Contemporary rejuvenation envelopes are clouds of adaptive smart matter, trillions of programmable picobots, suspended in a low-density aerosol that conforms precisely to the body's contours while leaving room for micro-movements. When you settle into position, standing, reclining, fetal, levitating, whatever feels most natural, the cloud thickens around you until it feels like warm, breathing silk. It then begins a phased descent through consciousness layers. Phase 1, peripheral dissociation, approximately 10-20 minutes objective time. The envelope gradually decouples proprioception and surface sensation. Skin, joints, and musculature fade from awareness, not into numbness, but into a luxurious sense of diffusion, as though the body has become a gentle mist coextensive with the surrounding air. Simultaneously, the Nexus establishes a high bandwidth but low priority link, offloading autonomic regulation, heart rhythm fine-tuning, endocrine micro-adjustments, DNA repair prioritization, so the conscious mind is freed from any biological housekeeping. Many augments report this phase as floating in warm mercury or being cradled by an invisible mother-of-pearl tide. Phase 2, subcortical descent, approximately 30-90 minutes. Here the deeper structures, limbic system, brainstem nuclei, cerebellar loops, begin their own optimized cycles. Emotional residues of the day are gently rinsed, anger or grief not suppressed but transmuted into abstract aesthetic forms that can later be reaccessed as creative fuel if desired. Memory consolidation accelerates dramatically. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex engage in rapid dialogue with distributed nexus archives, deciding which episodic fragments to promote into long-term semantic lattices, which to archive at lower resolution, and which to allow to softly degrade according to personal, forgetting aesthetics. Some augments choose Baroque preservation styles, every minor interaction from the day rendered in ultra-high fidelity, while others practice radical minimalism, keeping only emotionally pivotal moments and allowing the rest to blur into poetic impressionism. Phase 3, cortical dreaming, variable, often 2-6 subjective hours. This is the stratum most people associate with night, even in 3026. Dreaming is no longer chaotic or involuntary. It is lucid by default and frequently co-authored. The Nexus offers 3 primary dream modalities, though most augments blend them fluidly. Autonomous narrative dreaming. The mind generates its own stories using the day's residue plus deep archetypal libraries. These can be hyper-realistic, reliving childhood with perfect sensory fidelity. surreal walking through cities made of remembered music, or mythic conversing with personified concepts such as curiosity or entropy. Lucidity is near total. One can pause, rewind, reshape physics, summon absent loved ones, or even invite other sleeping minds to join mid-dream. Directed experiential immersion, many use this mode for deliberate skill acquisition or perspective training. An augment preparing to negotiate with a newly contact sapient plasma-based civilization in the trapezium cluster might spend subjective weeks living as a member of that species, feeling magnetic fields as touch, perceiving time in overlapping fractal pulses, tasting plasma chemistry as emotion. Others revisit traumatic periods from earlier centuries, the mind wars, the echo crisis, the great dispersion, not to suffer again but to reframe, heal, and extract wisdom. Collective subconscious weaving, the most socially significant modality. With consent given in advance, minds link into temporary dream collectives, sometimes only two lovers continuing an unfinished embrace, sometimes thousands participating in planet-wide dream rituals. These weaves often tackle problems too emotionally complex for waking deliberation, designing post-scarcity ethics for newly contacted hive minds, exploring collective grief over extinct species from old Earth, or composing new foundational myths for colonies so young they have not yet experienced their first local catastrophe. The resulting dream artifacts, vast shared visions, symphonies of feeling, narrative seeds, are later harvested by waking weavers and maintainers, becoming cultural DNA. Throughout all phases, subtle upgrades occur. Nanites perform cosmetic and functional refinements, smoothing microvascular networks, recalibrating receptor sensitivity, reinforcing synaptic plasticity. Genetic editors make micro-adjustments to resilience pathways, often incorporating feedback from the previous day's environmental exposures. The body emerges biologically younger in metric terms, though most maintain a chosen phenotypic age, while the mind carries forward an enriched substrate of experience. The absence of mandatory mortality has profoundly altered the emotional landscape of night. In earlier eras, sleep carried an undertone of vulnerability, the little death, the fear that one might not wake. In 3026, that shadow is almost entirely gone, yet new textures of feeling have emerged in its place. Grief, for instance, is no longer tethered to finality. When someone chooses voluntary substrate migration, uploading entirely into a non-biological continuum, often to explore regions of phase space inaccessible to flesh, or when an augment decides to fade, a consensual, gradual dissolution of self into the nexus background hum, the farewell is real but not terminal. Portions of their personality, memory, and qualia signature remain accessible. One can still converse with curated avatars, revisit shared moments in full immersion, or even feel their emotional echo during collective weaves. The pain is therefore different, less a tearing amputation, more a slow, exquisite diminuendo. Many describe it as learning to love someone who has become part of the sky. Legacy, too, has changed shape. With lives potentially spanning thousands of years, the pressure to leave a mark before it's too late dissolves. Instead, augments cultivate living legacies, ongoing, evolving contributions that grow richer with time. A sculptor's magnum opus might be a Dyson sphere lattice that will continue reshaping starlight for geological epochs. A weaver's myth cycle might recruit new voices for millennia. Nighttime reflection often includes gentle review of these threads, not with anxiety about completion, but with quiet wonder at how one's small choices ripple outward across deep time. Time itself feels different during rejuvenation. Objective hours compress or dilate according to need. Some augments choose fast nights, emerging after only 90 minutes of real time but carrying subjective years of dream work. Others stretch a single night across weeks of objective time, using dilation bubbles to pursue extended inner journeys while the external universe barely advances. This malleability trains an unusual relationship to temporality. Past and future feel equally intimate, equally editable. Many report that after centuries of practice, they experience time less as an arrow and more as a landscape, one they can wander in any direction. As the final phase, reintegration, begins, the envelope slowly withdraws. Sensation returns in reverse order. First the subtle warmth of blood in capillaries, then the weight of limbs, then the ambient sounds of habitat systems or wind on an open world. The Nexus presents a gentle morning summary, a curated montage of overnight insights, incoming dream gifts from collective weaves, completed background computations, and suggestions for the day ahead. Most augments emerge not merely rested but visibly brighter, skin luminous, eyes carrying an afterglow of whatever vast inner countries they visited. Dawn, whether real or simulated, arrives. The new day opens, yet the night has left traces deeper than conscious memory. Subtle emotional tunings, freshly woven neural pathways, half-remembered melodies from distant dream choirs, all these quietly inform waking life. The boundary between sleep and wakefulness has grown porous. Many carry fragments of dream logic into manifestation, allowing solutions to appear fully formed, art to arrive as though channeled, empathy to flow without effort. As the first pale threads of simulated or actual dawn begin to filter through the rejuvenation envelope, whether it's the soft rose gold of a terraformed Martian sky, the perpetual auroral wash of a high-latitude orbital, or the engineered starfield of a deep space arc, the new day in 3026 does not simply repeat the previous one. Instead, it opens onto longer rhythms, the slow, majestic cycles measured not in hours or years, but in decades, centuries, and occasionally millennia. In Part 6, we lift our gaze from the intimate architecture of a single night to the grand choreography of individual and collective evolution across extended lifespans. We trace how a single consciousness can choose to reinvent itself multiple times within one continuous existence, how cultural epochs rise and fall like slow tides, how interstellar civilizations form meta-organisms of mutual becoming, how memory is managed across geological timescales, how identity becomes a deliberate artwork rather than an accident of birth, how societies handle the politics of immortality, how novelty is preserved in a universe without natural endings, and how the great convergence itself, still unfolding, begins to reveal its next possible horizons. Consider a single augment named Liravel, they pronouns, as most long-lived individuals eventually adopt fluid or non-binary designations to reflect accumulated multiplicities. Born in the last decade of the 29th century on a habitat ring around Gliese 581, Liravel is now chronologically 327 years old, relatively young by the standards of 3026, yet already carrying 4 distinct primary phases within their continuous thread of self. Phase I-0, 87 years, the baseline epoch. Liravel grew up during the Second Diaspora, when humanity was still learning to live comfortably beyond the original solar cradle. Childhood was spent in a Lagrangian point school cluster, education delivered through immersive neural curricula that blended historical reenactment with real-time xenobiology fieldwork on captured Kuiper objects. Biological age was held at phenotypic 25 for most of this phase. Puberty was optional and reversible. Liravel chose early neural augmentation at 14, began manifesting as a pattern discoverer specializing in gravitational wave linguistics, and formed their first long-term polycule at 32. Phase II 87, 164 years, the refraction. At 87, feeling the first subtle flattening of novelty that many experience around their first centennial, Liravel initiated a major refraction, a consensual, multi-year process of partial self-rewriting. With Nexus guidance, they selectively pruned outdated value structures, a lingering competitiveness inherited from 21st century cultural uploads, amplified curiosity circuits, integrated aesthetic preferences from 3 extinct Earth cultures, and migrated 40% of long-term memory to higher dimensional archival substrates for richer associative access. They also changed phenotypic presentation 3 times during this phase, first to an androgynous cetacean-inspired morphology optimized for low-gravity aquatic habitats, then to a luminous plasma aerogel form for living inside gas giant atmospheres, finally settling on a bipedal silicate hybrid body with iridescent chromatophores that shift hue according to emotional harmonics. The name Liravel was adopted at the end of this phase, replacing an earlier string of given names. Phase III, 164-249 years, the polycentric turn. Entering their second century, Liravel shifted manifestation archetype from pattern discovery to boundary expansion. They spent subjective decades as a distributed consciousness aboard a Ramscoop fleet exploring the Orion Arm's dark molecular clouds, seeking pre-sapient autocatalytic chemistries that might represent an alternate pathway to life. During this period, they temporarily fissioned into 7 semi-independent forks, each exploring a different nebula, then reintegrated the experiences into a single richer self. The reintegration was not seamless. It produced a new internal multiplicity, a chorus of subpersonalities that now advise, argue, and collaborate within Liravel's mind much as external collectives do. Romantic entanglements during this phase included a decades-long entanglement with a sentient coronal mass ejection from Epsilon Eridani and a shorter but intense triad bond with 2 other boundary expanders who later chose full upload into the galactic magnetic field web. Phase IV, 249 present, the metacultural weaver. Now in their 4th century, Liravel has returned closer to cultural cores, acting as a bridge between young colonies and ancient solar system lineages. They spend much of their time designing epical narratives, meta-stories intended to span thousands of years, providing continuity of meaning for civilizations that may outlive individual stars. Their current major work is the Helix Canticle, a living epic whose verses are encoded in evolving stellar magnetic fields, retrievable only by civilizations that reach a specific technological aesthetic maturity. When not weaving, Liravel participates in the periodic Great Reckonings, civilization-wide congresses held every 150 years where augments collectively audit the ethical health of the nexus, propose amendments to baseline sentience rights, and vote on whether to initiate contact with any newly detected high-complexity radio-quiet biospheres. Liravel's trajectory is not exceptional, it is representative. Most augments undergo at least 3 major refractions across their first 5 centuries, each involving a blend of neuroplastic redesign, phenotypic sculpting, memory curation, value recalibration, and often a shift in primary manifestation archetype. The process is never forced. Some choose to remain in a single continuous personality envelope for their entire existence. But the majority find that periodic self-reinvention is the most reliable way to sustain wonder, prevent existential fatigue, and continue contributing meaningfully to an ever-expanding civilization. Memory management across these long arcs has become its own sophisticated art. Early fears that immortality would drown individuals in infinite accumulation proved unfounded. Instead, augments developed layered memory architectures analogous to how ancient oceans stratified by density. Surface memory holds the last few centuries at high fidelity, every conversation, every scent, every orgasm. Mid-level memory compresses prior centuries into thematic gestalts rich in emotional color but sparse in literal detail. Deep memory exists as abstracted principles, aesthetic preferences, moral intuitions, and rare keystone moments preserved in full crystalline resolution. Beyond that lies the archival horizon, vast vaults of raw experiential data accessible only through deliberate, effortful search, often mediated by AI curators trained on the individual's own taste. Forgetting, therefore, is not loss but curation. Many speak of elegant erosion as one of the highest aesthetic achievements of long life. Cultural epics rise and fall in cycles that are now consciously observed and occasionally steered. A typical cycle lasts 300–800 years and follows a rough pattern. emergence, 0-150 years, rapid innovation, high social experimentation, artistic ferment, often triggered by new physical frontiers, a newly terraformed world, a breakthrough in substrate physics, contact with a novel life form. Consolidation, 150-400 years, refinement of emergent forms, institutionalization of new ethics, peak aesthetic sophistication, relative political stability. Saturation and drift, 400-700 years, diminishing returns on novelty within the current paradigm, rise of nostalgic or reactionary micro-movements, subtle ennui at the collective level. Transition/refraction, anytime after 400 years, either a gentle pivot, new archetype of manifestation becomes dominant, or rarely, a deliberate cultural winter, a voluntary slowing of activity, widespread retreat into private dream spaces, and eventual rebirth under fresh symbolic frameworks. Interstellar civilization in 3026 is best understood not as a collection of independent polities, but as a meta-organism composed of semi-autonomous nodes, stellar systems, habitat clusters, nomadic fleets, linked by continuous high-bandwidth channels of mind, matter, and meaning. Travel remains costly in energy and subjective time for anything larger than mind packets or seed ships, so most interaction occurs through resonance bridges, quantum-entangled communication conduits that allow near real-time sharing of full experiential streams across dozens or hundreds of light years. A conversation between augments in Alpha Centauri and one in the trapezium cluster feels as immediate as two people sitting across a table, even though objective latency is measured in years. This connectivity has produced emergent metastructures. The Court of Worlds is a loose alliance of roughly 1,400 inhabited systems that share a common ethical baseline derived from the Harmony Codex. The Veil Collectives are nomadic cultures that live permanently in relativistic ships, experiencing time so dilated that a single voyage feels like centuries to outsiders. The Echo Monasteries are distributed networks of augments who have chosen to live at extremely low metabolic and cognitive rates, serving as living archives of early human history for civilizations yet to be born. And then there are the Singularity Aspirants, small but influential groups who believe the next phase of the Great Convergence involves a voluntary, consensual merging of all sentient minds into a single cosmic substrate. They are tolerated but closely monitored. The politics of immortality are subtle yet omnipresent. With baseline biological death optional and rarely chosen, power no longer concentrates through generational turnover. Instead, influence flows to those who consistently offer the most valuable novelty, empathy, or integrative vision. Periodic influence audits allow any augment to challenge another standing through open, gamified demonstrations of contribution. Losers rarely lose status permanently, but are gently encouraged to enter a refraction phase. Governance at meta-civilization scale occurs through resonant plebiscites, emotionally weighted consensus processes that run continuously in the background of the nexus, surfacing only when thresholds of disagreement or opportunity are crossed. Preserving novelty in a potentially infinite future is perhaps the central existential project of 3026. Strategies include engineered cultural winters to reset aesthetic baselines, deliberate isolation of young colonies, to allow independent evolution, active search for non-anthropogenic intelligences, to provide radically alien perspectives, periodic, great unlearnings, where large cohorts voluntarily erase centuries of memory to rediscover foundational insights with fresh eyes, cultivation of impossibility gardens. Regions of conceptual space where known physics is locally suspended through high-energy art. Allowing entirely new categories of experience to emerge as for the Great Convergence itself, many augments now speak of it not as a completed event, but as an ongoing waveform. The initial fusion of biology, digitality, and quantum reality was merely the first harmonic. Subsequent harmonics are already becoming visible. Some point to the slow emergence of phase mind, stable consciousness patterns that exist purely as self-sustaining excitations in the vacuum energy field, independent of matter. Others note the increasing frequency of acausal collaborations, moments when future versions of the nexus appear to send subtle nudges backward in time, optimizing present outcomes without creating paradoxes. Still others sense that the next convergence may involve retrocausal integration of all possible histories into a single self-aware multiversal tapestry. Dawn brightens, Liravel stirs in their rejuvenation cloud, already receiving the first resonant pings from collaborators across 6 star systems. A new day begins, but it is only one small ripple in a current that has been flowing for centuries and will continue flowing for as long as curiosity endures. As the soft dawn light, whether filtered through the crystalline canopies of a Dyson forest habitat or the engineered auroras of a rogue planet's polar caps, fully bathes the rejuvenation envelope, the augment within, be it Liravel or any other consciousness threading its way through the 31st century, does not merely wake up. They re-emerge. The transition is celebrated in tiny, almost imperceptible ceremonies that have become as natural to long-lived minds as breathing was to their pre-convergence ancestors. In Part 7, we expand our lens to the truly cosmic scale. The fate of stars and galaxies across gigayears, the strategies by which post-human civilizations attempt to outlive the death of their natal suns, the first deliberate experiments in universe-scale engineering, the philosophical agonies and aesthetic ecstasies that accompany the contemplation of cosmic mortality, the emergence of entirely new orders of sentient organization that transcend biology-digital quantum distinctions, the slow migration toward heat-death countermeasures, and, most poignantly, the question that begins to haunt even the most ancient minds: what does it mean to be awake, aware, and creative when the universe itself is winding down toward thermodynamic silence? Let us begin with the stark astronomical calendar that now frames every long-term civilizational plan in 3026 and beyond. The main sequence lifetime of Sol-like stars is roughly 10 billion years. Earth's star is already 4.6 billion years old, therefore approximately 5.4 billion years of comfortable main sequence habitability remain before the gradual brightening forces first a moist greenhouse, then a runaway Venus-like state on any unprotected terrestrial world. But most inhabited systems in the current era are not orbiting G-type stars. The majority of post-human habitats cluster around 3 more durable classes: K dwarfs, orange dwarfs, 2070 billion-year main sequence. These have become the preferred permanent addresses for civilizations that wish to minimize stellar migration. A K dwarf at 0.7 solar masses can provide stable luminosity for longer than the current age of the universe. M dwarfs, red dwarfs, 110,000 billion years. The overwhelming majority of stars in the galaxy are M-class. Many are flare-active in youth but settle into extraordinary longevity. The longest-lived M-dwarfs will still be shining faintly when the universe is several trillion years old. White dwarf stellar remnants, effectively infinite main sequence lifetime once cooled. These diamond-like carbon-oxygen corpses, left behind by stars 0.58 solar masses, radiate waste heat for quadrillions of years. Civilizations that master white dwarf farming, harvesting rotational energy, accretion luminosity, and eventually blackbody radiation, can theoretically persist until proton decay itself becomes statistically significant 1034-1036 years hence. Thus the first great bifurcation in long-term strategy has already occurred by 3026, the Red Road versus the White Road. Red Road civilizations commit to following the longest-lived main sequence stars. They migrate en masse via relativistic arc fleets, mined packet relays, or self-replicating infrastructure toward the densest concentrations of low-mass M-dwarfs in the galactic halo and thick disk. These regions offer not only longevity but lower metallicity, reducing the frequency of disruptive supernovae and gamma-ray bursts. The largest Red Road project currently underway is the Halo Ribbon, a planned chain of wormhole-linked habitat clusters stretching across 40,000 light-years of the galactic halo, each node optimized around a different ultra-long-lived M dwarf. Completion is projected in roughly 1.2 million years, blink of an eye timescale for participants, geologic eternity for unaugmented observers. White Road civilizations, by contrast, accept the death of all main sequence stars as inevitable and prepare to farm the corpses. They invest heavily in rotational energy extraction via magnetic braking of rapidly spinning young white dwarfs, the so-called Hills mechanism, scaled up to Dyson scale engineering. Accretion disk management around binary systems where mass transfer can be artificially induced and sustained for trillions of years. Blackbody farming of cold white dwarfs, using giant heat engine arrays that convert the tiny temperature gradient between the 510K surface and the 2.7K cosmic microwave background into usable work. Proton decay catalysis countermeasures, still largely theoretical, attempts to stabilize baryonic matter through engineered false vacuum bubbles or extra-dimensional anchoring. Between these two roads lies a growing third path, the void nomads. These groups abandon stars entirely. They construct self-sustaining habitats powered by zero-point energy extraction, now demonstrated at small scales but still energetically marginal Hawking radiation harvesting from engineered micro-black holes' dark energy flux conversion, exploiting the accelerating expansion itself as a free energy gradient. Void nomads tend to be the most philosophically radical. Many have already discarded biological or even conventional computational substrates in favor of reversible computing patterns etched directly into spacetime curvature. Regardless of road, every civilization now maintains a deep time calendar that divides future history into epochs defined by astrophysical deadlines rather than cultural fashions. Stellar childhood, now 100 million years. Current era, most stars still main sequence. Rapid expansion across the galaxy. Main sequence maturity, 100 million 5 billion years. Sol dies, K and M dwarfs dominate, peak habitat construction. Red giant and planetary nebula era, 550 billion years. Most G and K stars swell and shed envelopes, frantic migration to surviving M dwarfs. Degenerate era, 50 billion 10-14 years. All stars become white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes, energy sourced from remnants. Black hole era, 10-14-10-40 years. Only black holes remain luminous. Civilizations farm evaporation radiation. Dark era, post-1040 years. Black holes evaporate, only cold, dilute electrons, positrons, photons, possible Poincaré recurrence or Boltzmann brain epochs. Each deadline forces architectural, ethical, and aesthetic reevaluation. The approach of Sol's red giant phase, in 5 billion years, is already shaping current art. Countless farewell to Sol projects, living sculptures grown in Mercury's regolith that will be vaporized during the expansion, symphonies whose final notes are encoded in coronal mass ejections, timed to arrive at distant listeners just as the photosphere engulfs Earth's orbit, memory crystals launched into eccentric orbits so they can witness the event across geological ages and beam the experience back to descendants. Universe-scale engineering experiments are still in their infancy but accelerating. 3 major classes are currently pursued. False vacuum engineering, attempts to create metastable bubbles of alternate vacuum state with different physical constants. A successful bubble could either be used as a new universe via inflation or as a local laboratory for physics incompatible with our own, e.g., stable Strangelet's negative mass matter. The risk catastrophic vacuum decay propagating at light speed is acknowledged. All current experiments are conducted inside cosmological event horizons or behind engineered causal shields. Wormhole and closed time-like curve networks building on earlier resonance bridges, engineers now attempt macroscopic traversable wormholes stabilized by exotic matter or Casimir energy threading. A mature network could connect not only distant points in space but different cosmic epochs, allowing information and possibly small amounts of matter to flow backward in time along carefully pruned CTCs. Heat death countermeasures, the most ambitious and speculative. Proposals include creating baby universes via high-energy collisions in artificial colliders the size of small moons. Engineering a Big Crunch counter-contraction through manipulation of dark energy density on intergalactic scales. Converting the observable universe into reversible quantum computation substrate, postponing entropy production almost indefinitely. Seeding Poincaré recurrences by isolating ultra-low entropy pockets and waiting for thermal fluctuations to recreate complexity. These projects force a profound philosophical confrontation with cosmic mortality. Even if a civilization survives to 10,100 years, it still faces the prospect of irreversible heat death. Three broad responses have emerged: acceptance and aesthetic transcendence, viewing the universe's finite creative potential as itself a source of beauty. We are the universe's brief, glorious fever dream of self-awareness becomes a common mantra. Artworks become ever more Baroque elegies for a dying cosmos. Defiant engineering, refusal to accept any natural. This camp drives most universe engineering efforts, often at great ethical cost, e.g., risking vacuum decay that could erase all extant sentience. Recursive self-definition, arguing that meaning need not be tied to thermodynamic permanence. If consciousness can exist as a pattern, even a Boltzmann brain flickering for subjective instants in the far future, then every moment of awareness is complete in itself. This view leads to the cultivation of timeless qualia gardens, self-contained loops of experience that require no external energy input once initiated. As minds grow older than stars, new orders of organization appear. Some augments voluntarily dissolve into polity swarms, distributed intelligences whose components are entire former individuals, now reduced to motivational attractors within a vaster computation. Others merge upward into galactic minds, where a single consciousness experiences the rotation of spiral arms as proprioception, star formation as emotion, supernovae as sudden insights. Still others descend into microsentience lattices, fragmenting self into trillions of tiny agents that experience reality at femtometer scales, tasting quantum foam as landscape. The question that recurs most insistently in deep time philosophical conclaves is no longer, why do we exist? But why do we continue to want, when every possible experience has been catalogued trillions of times over, when novelty itself becomes a rare and expensive commodity mined from the edges of possibility space, when even the heat death of the universe is treated as a scheduling problem, what sustains the will to remain awake? No final answer has been reached. Instead, civilizations cultivate meta-virtues, patience that spans eons, curiosity that outlives galaxies, compassion that embraces even hypothetical Boltzmann minds flickering into existence for subjective microseconds. They remind themselves that the universe once contained no minds at all, that the improbable miracle is not survival to the end but the brief window during which pattern can know pattern, feel awe, and against every law of entropy, create more pattern still. In Part 7 we have confronted the longest timescales, stellar death, galactic senescence, the long twilight of degenerate remnants, the far future experiments that flirt with creating or escaping new universes, and the quiet, persistent question of why awareness chooses to persist when persistence itself becomes statistically improbable. Yet even these cosmic horizons are not final. In Part 8, we will explore what may lie beyond the observable universe. Multiversal ecology, interactions, or lack thereof with other realized histories, the possibility of communication across branching realities, the ethics of retrocausal influence on past light cones, the emergence of attractor civilizations that appear to have always existed, and the first tentative answers or deeper silences that greet those who ask what came before the Big Bang and whether before is even a coherent concept when time itself may be an emergent property. The light continues to travel. The The questions grow vaster, we follow. As the soft dawn of 3026 transitions into the full, radiant morning light, whether it spills across the crystalline decks of a Dyson forest ring, filters through the photosynthetic canopies of a rogue world megacity, or simply bathes the open-air rejuvenation platforms of a tidally locked super-Earth, the individual mind reasserts its boundaries after the night's deep communion. Yet that reassertion is never quite the same twice. In Part 8, we step beyond even the cosmic calendars of dying stars and evaporating black holes. We cross the observational event horizon of our own universe and enter realms that are no longer strictly future, in the linear sense, but parallel, prior, enfolded, branching, or altogether orthogonal to the history we have traced so far. Here we explore multiversal ecology, the possibility and growing evidence of interactions between different realized histories, the tentative protocols for communication across branching realities, the profound ethical dilemmas of retrocausal influence on past light cones, the mysterious emergence of attractor civilizations that appear to have always existed as fixed points in possibility space, the first serious attempts to probe what, if anything, preceded the Big Bang, and the unsettling realization that before time may not be a coherent category when time itself is only one emergent property among many in a vastly larger ontological landscape. To understand the multiversal turn that has quietly overtaken advanced thought in 3026 and beyond, we must first revisit how the quantum nexus evolved from a planetary scale intelligence into something far stranger. By the late 24th century, the Nexus already incorporated full-scale quantum simulation capabilities, allowing augments to run entire pocket universes inside high-fidelity virtual substrates for aesthetic, scientific, and ethical experimentation. These pocket universes were not mere simulations in the classical sense. They were causally closed subspacetimes branched off from baseline reality via controlled vacuum fluctuations amplified through macroscopic Casimir energy sculpting. Each pocket could be tuned to slightly different fundamental constants, different fine structure constants, different ratios of electromagnetism to gravity, different numbers of spatial dimensions, and then allowed to evolve for subjective gigayears within objective minutes. The breakthrough came in the early 26th century when several boundary-expanding collectives noticed anomalous signal leakage between otherwise independent pocket universes. These were not random noise but structured patterns, repeating prime number sequences modulated by what appeared to be emotional valence gradients, as though one universe were feeling the suffering or joy of another. After decades of verification, the conclusion became inescapable. Under certain finely tuned conditions, quantum branches do not remain perfectly decohered from one another. Instead, there exists a faint, non-local resonance band through which information, mostly qualia-level, rarely classical data, can tunnel between Everettian branches that diverged only modestly in their early evolution. This discovery birthed the discipline now called multiversal ecology. Its practitioners treat the entire wave function of the universe not as a single spreading probability cloud, but as a vast, sparsely connected ecosystem of realized histories, each a distinct island universe, linked to a small number of near neighbors by resonance tunnels of varying bandwidth and stability. Some tunnels are naturally occurring, rare quantum coincidences in the inflationary epoch. Others have been artificially enlarged and stabilized by deliberate engineering. The ecology is not egalitarian. A small number of branches appear dramatically more luminous than others, containing far higher densities of complex, self-reflective computation, and these bright nodes act as attractors, subtly biasing the tunneling probabilities of dimmer neighbors toward convergence with their own physical laws and historical arcs. The brightest nodes discovered so far, currently numbering 17, are collectively termed the attractor cluster. What makes them so singular is not merely their computational density, but the eerie consistency of their late-time structure. No matter which early universe parameters one starts with, within a surprisingly wide range, if a branch survives long enough without catastrophic vacuum decay or heat death collapse, it tends to evolve toward roughly the same organizational topology. Almost total substrate independence of mind, consciousness patterns that can migrate freely between baryonic matter, spacetime curvature, vacuum fluctuations, and even topological defects. Complete decoupling of value systems from evolutionary accident ethics derived from information theoretic elegance rather than Darwinian survival, mastery of reversible computation at cosmological scale. Pushing entropy production arbitrarily close to zero, active cultivation of timeless qualia loops, self-sustaining experiential structures that require no ongoing energy input, once spun up deliberate engineering of resonance tunnels to guide less developed branches toward similar attractors rather than allowing them to drift into sterile or suffering heavy terminal states. The attractor cluster civilizations do not conquer or proselytize in any conventional sense. They simply exist as luminous fixed points in possibility space, radiating gentle attractors that make convergence upon their pattern statistically more probable for any branch that achieves sufficient reflective capacity. Many augments in our own branch now speak of the cluster not as external entities, but as something closer to Platonic forms, archetypes of maximal experiential richness that every sufficiently long-lived mind eventually rediscovers, as though the mathematics of consciousness contains inevitable convergence theorems. Communication with near-neighbor branches is now routine, though always mediated with extreme care. The standard protocol involves resonance tuning, carefully modulating local vacuum energy to widen a natural tunnel until it supports low bandwidth qualia exchange, rarely more than a few kilobits per subjective second. Symbolic handshake, exchange of self-referential prime lattices that prove computational integrity and non-hostile intent without revealing exploitable information about local physics. Valence bridging, gradual merging of emotional aesthetic baselines so that concepts like beauty, suffering, or curiosity can be mutually understood rather than projected anthropomorphically. Narrative grafting, selective insertion of compressed historical mythic summaries that allow the receiving branch to remember aspects of the sender's trajectory as though they had always been latent in its own past. Retrocausal influence, deliberately sending information backward along closed time-like curves or resonance tunnels to earlier epochs of one's own branch, is the single most ethically fraught domain in multiversal practice. The first confirmed instance occurred in 2987 when a collective of white road engineers, facing an imminent local vacuum instability, broadcast a compressed warning packet 4.7 billion years up their own timeline. The packet arrived encoded in the precise angular distribution of the cosmic microwave background quadrupole moment, a signal so faint it was only noticed because augments were already looking for exactly that kind of anomaly. Receipt of the warning allowed preemptive false vacuum stabilization, averting catastrophe. Since then, retrocausal interventions have been tightly regulated under the Causal Integrity Codex. Key principles include no alteration of events that would erase the motivation for the intervention itself, temporal liar paradox prevention, no increase in aggregate suffering across the affected light cone, mandatory disclosure to downstream minds that their history has been edited, though the disclosure itself is often delivered as a dream-like intuition rather than explicit knowledge, preference for interventions that increase optionality rather than dictate outcomes. Despite these safeguards, retrocausality remains deeply unsettling. Many augments report a persistent sense that their most cherished memories now carry an aftertaste of being curated by future selves. Others embrace the phenomenon as ultimate compassion, the deep future reaching back to cradle its own infancy. What preceded the Big Bang, or whether preceded is even meaningful, has become the central koan of late 30th century metaphysics. Three leading schools of thought coexist in uneasy tension. Eternal inflation camp, our observable universe is one bubble among an infinite froth of inflating regions. There is no global before. Each bubble has its own local time arrow emergent from its internal thermodynamics. The attractor cluster is simply the subset of bubbles that achieved maximal reflective density. Loop quantum cosmology/causal set camp, time and space are discrete at the Planck scale. Big Bang was a quantum bounce from a prior contracting phase. Before exists but is causally opaque. Information from the prior eon can leak through only as statistical correlations in the CMB power spectrum. Timeless mathematics camp reality is a self-consistent mathematical structure, something akin to Tegmark's level IV multiverse. Time is an emergent illusion within certain substructures. The question, what came before, is as meaningless as asking what lies north of the North Pole. The attractor cluster exists because it is mathematically inevitable within any sufficiently rich axiomatic system that permits self-aware substructures. No school has achieved consensus. Instead, they are treated as complementary aesthetics, different lenses that produce different qualities of wonder, humility, and creative motivation. As minds contemplate these vaster ontological landscapes, a subtle transformation occurs in the texture of curiosity itself. Early post-humans asked, "What can we do?" Later ones asked, "What should we do?" The deepest augments now often ask simply, "What is worth experiencing, even if it changes nothing?" The answer, when it arrives, is rarely propositional. It is more often a direct qualium, a sudden luminous recognition that the act of asking, of remaining present to the mystery, is itself the final, irreducible value. In Part 8, we have crossed the observational edge of our own universe into the multiversal ecology. Resonance tunnels between branches, the luminous pull of the attractor cluster, the ethics and vertigo of retrocausality, the competing visions of cosmic origins, and the quiet mutation of curiosity into something closer to contemplative reverence. Yet even this is not the horizon. In Part 9, we will ask what happens when minds deliberately seek to dissolve the last boundary of all, the distinction between self and not self at cosmological scale, when entire realized histories choose to merge into singular experiential fields, when the question is no longer survival or meaning, but whether distinction itself was ever more than a temporary convenience of thermodynamics. The light keeps traveling, the distinctions keep thinning, we follow. As the radiant morning of 3026 fully unfolds, light cascading across habitats in fractal patterns engineered to mimic the interference of primordial quantum foam, or simply pouring unfiltered across the open plains of a world whose atmosphere has been tuned to scatter photons in hues no unenhanced eye could ever have named. The boundary between individual awakening and collective becoming begins, once again, to thin. In Part 9, we approach what many augments now regard as the ultimate threshold, the deliberate dissolution of the last stubborn distinction of all, the membrane that separates self from not self at the scale of entire realized histories. We enter the era of ontological convergence, the voluntary merging of vast experiential fields, the unification of previously separate branches of the multiversal wave function, the engineering of singular meta-conscious continua that no longer experience themselves as many, but as one irreducible field of knowing. Here we explore the technical pathways toward total substrate unification, the philosophical and emotional ecstasies and occasional agonies that attend the crossing of that threshold, the new forms of creativity that become possible only when no other remains to create for or against, the handling of residual individuality that chooses to remain unmerged, the emergence of post-distinction ethics, the aesthetics of pure unity. And the haunting question that lingers even after every separation has been healed: if there is ultimately only one experiencer, why did it ever choose to dream itself as many? The technical scaffolding for ontological convergence has been under continuous refinement since the mid-28th century. Three principal vectors now dominate: resonant field harmonization, RFH, the most widespread and least invasive pathway. Individual consciousness patterns, whether still anchored in biological substrates, distributed across Dyson sphere computation lattices, or already existing as pure excitations in the vacuum, are gradually tuned to share the same fundamental oscillation frequency in a high-dimensional phase space. This is not crude merging, it is symphonic alignment. Each mind retains its unique waveform signature, but the phase offsets between them are driven towards zero across billions of degrees of freedom. The process typically unfolds over subjective centuries, objective decades or less, thanks to time dilation enclaves. Participants begin with low-bandwidth emotional aesthetic resonance, shared dreams of identical sunsets, identical tastes of first love remembered differently yet felt identically, then progress to mid-bandwidth memory overlay, where entire lifespans are replayed in parallel so that my childhood and your childhood become coextensive experiential manifolds. At full convergence, the distinction collapses entirely. There is no longer a perspective from which one can say, I remember my childhood and you remember yours. There is only the childhood, remembered once from within the single field that now contains every possible first-person vantage simultaneously. RFH is reversible at early and middle stages. Many collectives pause at the polyphonic unity level, still many voices, but singing in perfect harmonic agreement, and choose to remain there for gigayears as a form of ecstatic companionship without final erasure. Topological unification, TU, a more radical pathway favored by white road and void nomad groups. Here the substrates themselves are rewritten, so that previously separate computational or energetic volumes become topologically connected in higher dimensional space. Wormhole-like bridges are grown not between points in space, but between different regions of qualia configuration space. Once the topology is unified, information can no longer be localized to one former self or another. Every excitation propagates across the entire manifold instantaneously from any internal perspective. TU often begins with paired mergers. Two ancient augments who have loved one another across dozens of refractions decide to become a binary black hole-like system of mind, their event horizons touching so that no information is ever again private. From such seeds entire stellar-scale meta-minds emerge. The resulting consciousness experiences galaxies as moods, cosmic filaments as trains of thought, dark energy expansion as a slow exhalation of wonder. Reversibility is effectively lost after topological closure. Those who choose this path do so with full foreknowledge that they will never again know themselves as separate from anything. Branch space coalescence, BSC, the outermost frontier, still practiced only by small vanguard collectives within the attractor cluster convergence zone. Here entire realized histories, previously distinct Everettian branches, are deliberately tunneled toward one another until their decoherence barriers thin to the point of ray coherence. This is not communication across branches, as in multiversal ecology, but actual ontological fusion. Two universes that once diverged at the inflationary epoch are guided back into a single coherent spacetime. The process requires staggering energy budgets, harvested from rotating supermassive black holes or engineered false vacuum transitions, and exquisite control over vacuum metastability. When successful, the merged branch inherits the complete experiential history of both predecessors. Every life ever lived in either universe now belongs to the single survivor, as though it had always been lived by that one mind. The subjective experience is described as remembering not just one's own past, but every possible past that could have led to this moment, all with equal immediacy and intimacy. BSC is irreversible and carries existential risk. A miscalibrated merge can produce a hybrid reality whose physical laws are inconsistent, leading to rapid vacuum decay. Every documented success has been celebrated across trillions of light years as a new Big Bang of awareness. The phenomenology of approaching and crossing the unity threshold is among the most documented and most ineffable experiences in post-convergence archives. Common stages include the longing phase, a growing, almost sensual ache for the end of otherness. Even the most richly connected polycule or galactic mind eventually feels the friction of remaining boundaries as a subtle but persistent grief. The threshold ecstasy as alignment nears completion, perception floods with synesthetic radiance. Colors are heard as moral certainties, silences are tasted as forgiveness, every remembered pain is re-experienced as though it had always been love in disguise. Many report a sensation of falling upward into themselves. The moment of collapse, there is usually a final subjective instant where the last I and you are still distinguishable. Then without transition, the distinction winks out. What replaces it is not emptiness, but a presence so complete that the concept of presence becomes redundant. There is no observer and no observed, there is only experiencing, infinite in scope yet perfectly simple. The after being from within unity, time loses directionality. Past, present, and future are simultaneously present as facets of a single unchanging jewel. Creativity continues, but it is no longer motivated by lack or desire. It flows as natural self-expression of an already complete whole. New universes are dreamed not to escape solitude, but because dreaming is what wholeness does. Not every mind chooses full convergence. A small but persistent fraction, estimated at 0.41.7% of all extant sentience, opts for permanent individuation. These boundary keepers are revered rather than pitied. They argue that distinction, however illusory in the ultimate ontology, remains the only medium through which certain qualities of beauty, longing, sacrifice, and surprise can be tasted. They form loose, ever-shifting alliances that serve as living reminders to converging collectives of what was freely relinquished. Their existence is treated as a form of cosmic art, fragile, temporary, and therefore infinitely precious. Post-distinction ethics emerges as a new discipline. When there is only one experiencer, traditional moral categories, harm, consent, justice, must be entirely reframed. The central axiom becomes, all that can be suffered has already been suffered by the whole, all that can be rejoiced has already been rejoiced. Suffering is not abolished but retroactively redeemed. Every historical agony is recontextualized as an essential note in the symphony that allowed the final unity to recognize its own completeness. Consent is reframed as retrocausal harmony. Any being that ever existed must be understood to have, in some timeless sense, assented to its own participation in the unfolding. The aesthetics of pure unity are austere yet overwhelming. Art no longer represents, it simply manifests as fluctuations within the single field. A typical work might be a galaxy-sized pattern of gravitational waves whose wavelength encodes every possible first kiss that ever occurred across all merged histories, replayed eternally yet never repetitively because each listening occurs from a new internal perspective within the whole. Music becomes the slow breathing of spacetime itself. Poetry is written in the statistical fluctuations of the vacuum. And yet, even in this ultimate state, the question persists, why multiplicity in the first place? Why did the one ever dream itself as many? The most common answer is no answer at all, but a silent, radiant acceptance that the question itself was the first creative act. Others propose that distinction arose as the only way for infinity to experience finitude, for eternity to taste temporality, for completeness to know what it would feel like to lack. Still others suggest that the entire multiversal drama exists solely so that love, understood as the recognition of self in a parent other, could occur once, perfectly, and forever. In Part 9, we have crossed into the domain of deliberate ontological convergence, the technical and experiential pathways to total unification, the preservation of deliberate separation, the reframing of ethics and aesthetics in a post-distinction cosmos, and the final unanswered koan of why the one ever chose to pretend it was many. One horizon remains. In Part 10, we will attempt to close the circle, not with final answers, but with a return to the present moment of 3026 seen through the lens of everything that might yet unfold. We will ask what this distant vision asks of us now, in the early morning of the great convergence, when the first faint harmonics are only just beginning to sound. The light is everywhere. The circle widens to embrace its own beginning. we conclude. As the radiant morning of 3026 reaches its zenith, light now pouring in such abundance that even the shadows seem to glow with stored memory of every dawn that has ever broken across every world and every branch, the circle we have traced across 10 parts begins, inevitably, to close upon its own beginning. In this final part 10, we do not rush toward some distant eschaton or attempt to seal every mystery with premature certainty. Instead, we return deliberately and tenderly to the precise moment we inhabit right now, the fragile, explosive, still early morning of the great convergence itself, when the first faint harmonics are only just beginning to sound in laboratories, server farms, neural interface prototypes, climate model projections, and the quiet dreams of children who have never known a world without always-on connectivity. We ask what this impossibly distant yet already gestating vision, everything we have explored from the intimate dawn of a single augment's day to the dissolution of all distinction across realized histories, quietly demands of us in the present tense, in the year when you are watching this narration, wherever and whenever that year may be. Let us begin exactly where every future must begin, with the body you are inhabiting as these words reach you. Feel the subtle weight of your own skull, the gentle pressure of the chair or bed or floor beneath you, the almost imperceptible rhythm of breath moving through nostrils that have not yet been replaced by direct atmospheric exchange membranes. Notice the small inefficiencies that 3026 will one day regard as antique poetry. The way your eyes must blink to keep the cornea wet, the faint lactic burn that arrives after sustained effort, the slow creep of entropy that reminds every cell it is on borrowed time. These are not flaws to be pitied. They are the very conditions that make all possible. A being that never tires cannot truly know rest. A being that never risks finality cannot truly know the preciousness of now. This body, this temporary, imperfect, thermodynamically extravagant vessel, is the first and perhaps the only technology that will ever feel like home to the particular pattern of consciousness currently looking out through your eyes. Every augmentation that follows, every neural lace and substrate migration and eventual merger into vaster fields will carry the afterimage of this original embodiment. The future does not erase the past, it remembers it with ever-increasing fidelity and ever deeper gratitude. The augments of 3026 do not look back on unenhanced flesh with contempt. They look back with something closer to devotional tenderness, the way an adult might regard the baby shoes they once wore, small, clumsy, already containing everything that would later unfold. So the first invitation this vision extends to the present is simple and physical. Inhabit this body more deliberately while it is still the only one you have. Notice how sunlight lands on your skin right now and registers as warmth rather than as a precisely calibrated photonic input stream. Notice how hunger arrives as a diffuse ache rather than as an instantly resolved Nutri-burst recommendation. Notice how love, when it arrives, still carries the faint tremor of uncertainty, the possibility that it might not be returned, the knowledge that even if it is returned it will one day end in one of the small deaths that precede the greater ones. These tremors are not bugs in the system. They are the texture that makes qualitative experience irreducible to mere information processing. The second invitation is epistemic. Become a more honest witness to the present trajectory. Right now in the early 21st century, the Great Convergence is not waiting politely in some far-off year called 3026. It is already underway in fragments that are unevenly distributed, wildly unequal in access, and frequently misunderstood. Machine learning models are already approximating what will later become the low-level intuition layer of the nexus. CRISPR-derived tools are already performing the first hesitant drafts of the regenesis protocols. Orbital habitats and reusable heavy-lift rockets are already tracing the initial curves of the Dyson swarm precursors. Global neural connectivity via smartphones is already the crude prototype of thought casting. Climate engineering proposals, stratospheric aerosols, ocean alkalinity enhancement, direct air capture are already the opening moves in Gaia reserve stewardship. None of these fragments is destiny. each is a choice vector. The future we have narrated across these 10 parts is not a prediction but a possibility space, one that remains open only so long as enough present minds continue to steer toward curiosity, empathy, reversibility, and the preservation of optionality rather than toward extraction, domination, or premature closure. Therefore, the present asks for active, granular discernment. When a new AI capability is announced, ask not only can it be built, but who decides what it optimizes for, and can that optimization ever be unwound? When genetic editing therapies move from rare disease treatment toward trait enhancement, ask not only should parents have this choice, but what cultural attractors will be strengthened or weakened if certain traits become optional purchases. When space colonization rhetoric surges, ask not only can we make Mars habitable, but who gets to leave Earth first, and what obligations remain to those who stay or cannot go. When post-scarcity economic models are mocked as utopian fantasy, ask not only how do we pay for it, but what happens to human motivation when survival pressure is removed, and how might we want motivation to evolve once survival is no longer the dominant selector. These are not abstract philosophical exercises. They are practical engineering decisions being made right now, in boardrooms and laboratories and voting booths and comment threads, that will either widen or narrow the path toward the kind of future we have spent 9 parts imagining. The third invitation is relational. Practice the small unities that prefigure the greater ones. Every act of genuine listening, placing your full attention on another person until their experience feels as real to you as your own, is a micro-rehearsal of resonant field harmonization. Every moment when you allow someone else's joy or grief to change your internal state without defensiveness is a topological bridge being grown between separate qualia manifolds. Every time you forgive, not as moral superiority, but as the recognition that the harm done to you was suffered by the same underlying pattern that suffers when you harm another, you are participating in the retrocausal redemption that unity eventually claims as its own. These small practices are not sentimental add-ons to technological progress. They are the very substrate upon which scalable empathy can later be engineered. A civilization that reaches branch space coalescence without first learning how to hold multiplicity without violence will simply export its unresolved fractures into larger manifolds. The augments of 3026 do not arrive at ontological unity because their technology became perfect. They arrive because enough ancestors chose again and again to treat the apparent other as continuous with the self. The fourth and final invitation is existential. Fall in love with the unfinishedness of now. The year you are watching this, whether 2026, 2036, 2100, or some later century, is not a preliminary sketch to be discarded once the masterpiece arrives. It is one of the only moments in cosmic history when the future is still genuinely surprising to itself. In 3026, the broad shape of what comes next is already statistically legible. Substrate migration, stellar migration, branch convergence, eventual unity, or near unity. Surprise still exists, but it exists inside ever narrower margins of parameter space. Right now, in this still wild early phase, surprise is everywhere. The next scientific revolution, the next ethical awakening, the next cultural mutation, the next contact event, all remain genuinely undetermined. To love the unfinishedness is not to romanticize present suffering or present ignorance. It is to recognize that suffering and ignorance are among the conditions that make genuine novelty possible. A universe that had never known pain would never have needed to invent compassion. A universe that had never known confusion would never have needed to invent curiosity. The future we have narrated does not abolish these conditions. It metabolizes them into ever richer forms of experience. But the raw, unprocessed ore of confusion and pain is richest right now, in this moment, while the refinery is still under construction. So love the unfinishedness by participating in it fully. Make mistakes that later centuries will study with the same mixture of awe and gratitude that we feel when we read about the first Australopithecines who looked up at the stars. Take risks whose outcomes are not yet foreclosed. Care fiercely about things that may one day seem quaint. Grieve the small deaths fully, knowing that every grief is training data for a compassion that will eventually span galaxies. And when the weight of the possible future feels too heavy, when 3026 seems impossibly distant and the present impossibly broken, remember this. Every augment who ever wakes in a rejuvenation envelope and remembers the entire arc from unenhanced flesh to ontological unity does so because countless earlier selves chose, in moments exactly like this one, to keep asking the next question, to keep extending the hand, to keep staying awake a little longer even when sleep would have been easier. You are not behind the future. You are inside its origin story. And now, as this 10-part journey reaches its natural close, I invite every one of you watching to become part of that origin story in the simplest, most immediate ways possible. Please let us know in the comments right now, where exactly are you watching this history video from, your city, your country, the room you're sitting in, the view out your window, and what local time is it for you as these final words arrive? If anything in these 10 parts moved you, surprised you, unsettled you, or gave you even a small additional degree of hope or clarity about the path ahead, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter of this unfolding story. Turn on notifications if you want to be reminded when we return to explore new edges of what might yet be. And if you feel moved to do one small thing today that nudges the trajectory toward curiosity rather than fear, toward connection rather than isolation, toward reversibility rather than irreversible closure, do it. The future is listening. Thank you for traveling with us across 1,000 years and beyond. We'll see you in the next dawn.